And here we are. Welcome back to Redshirt Sophomore, where we never sit out. We're your hosts, MD and CD. But guess what? We got a guest today. We got a special guest today. His name is Drew. Drew, would you like to tell us what you're about?
Yeah, I'm all about the Aggies, man. I started doing this a couple years ago, making content, Texas A&M. I'm a fan that found a camera and has an internet connection, and I started talking to it. That's really how this started, and I love it, man. We just highlight everything that goes on in the world of A&M football, a little bit of national stuff. But yeah, man, I just talk Aggie football pretty much exclusively on this channel. It's a great time. Thanks for having me, guys.
Oh, I mean, no problem. We are stoked. CD, what is going on with you, man?
Nothing. I'm super excited, pumped to talk with Drew. Couple Aggies right now. I feel outnumbered right now down in Texas country, but I'm excited. I love talking about A&M. Obviously, they're very near and dear to my heart, and obviously very polarizing offseason. I know you both have a lot to say, and I'm excited to learn, as I'm sure all you viewers are as well.
Absolutely. Look, in the rule here, right? If you like the content, like the video, right? That's all you gotta do. Consider subscribing as well if you want more content like this. We're happy to have Drew here. Make sure you guys check out his channel. That'll be in the description as well. His channel's bigger than ours. It's better production. Everything's better about it. So just go check it out if you're an A&M fan, or if you're not an A&M fan and you want to learn more about Texas A&M, go check out Drewtamu. So thank you so much. Are you guys ready to get into it today?
Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
All righty. All right. First on deck, let's talk about this A&M coaching staff. So, of course, in the offseason, Texas A&M has a head coaching job open. They go and they get Mike Elko. And Mike Elko, he's built out a coaching staff, and I think a lot of fans are happy about that, about the staff so far. Can you confirm this, Drew?
I can definitely confirm this, man. If you want me to get right into it, it kind of hit me out of left field when Jimbo was fired. And I know we had kind of a rough couple of years, but even down to the day it happened, it was pretty crazy to me. I mean, even when I just think back to like a couple months ago, we're just like square in the Jimbo era, if you will. And then all of a sudden it's done and we have a whole new coaching staff at the helm. It's still kind of hard to wrap my mind around, especially for me, considering I've only been doing this since Jimbo's been the coach. So I've exclusively been talking Jimbo Fisher's A&M for a couple of years now. But the way this staff has come together over the last couple of months, it's been remarkable, man. I think it exceeded expectations.
All right, awesome. So let's start here then. Let's talk about some of the highlights of this coaching staff. Let me ask you to walk us through some of those highlights and what they really mean to Texas A&M and maybe why this fits really well.
Okay, so you think back a couple years of struggling that A&M has had, and I think of a couple of things that I think were addressed within this coaching staff. So I feel like A&M always came up short in close games over the last couple of years. I think Jimbo won some close games earlier in his tenure, obviously in 2020, but over the last couple of years, it just felt like A&M lacked some toughness or a little bit of grit at the end of games. I felt like
Especially
A&M
on
made the big mistakes.
especially on the road.
Oh
Especially on
yeah.
the road.
Oh man. Don't even get me started about that road drought. It's been rough. I think was the last road win the Missouri game in 2020. I think that's the last road win for Texas
Yeah, I think the
A&M.
last ranked road win was like 2016 or 2014 against Ole Miss or something like that. It's
Yeah. Yeah,
it
man.
goes all the way back to like Kevin Sumlin or something like that. It's absurd.
Yeah, exactly, man. It's been rough. So I think a lot of that goes to mindset and toughness and kind of the intangible stuff because you think about A&M, the talent's there. They've been recruiting at the highest level. Even through the Sumlin era, A&M recruited well, but besides a couple Johnny years, not much to show for it. So I guess I'll start with the tip of the iceberg, the moves, the coaching or acquisitions that in my opinion move the needle the most. And that starts with Tommy Moffitt. I think you get a great strength and conditioning program. That's kind of besides recruiting, if you will, the lifeblood of your program is going to be strength and conditioning. First of all, because that guy is around your players year round. I mean, they're training year round. If you look at A&M social media right now, we're getting clips of Tommy Moffitt interacting with the players right now. So that's a very important piece. And what's so great about Tommy, I mean, you look at some great coaches. I'm from San Antonio, so we have the Spurs. Greg Popovich has a huge coaching lineage throughout the NBA. And that's kind of a testament to his greatness. If you look at Tommy Moffitt, I don't know if you've heard of the Moffitt method. That's kind of his methodology, his program, his his whole structure of strength and conditioning, dozens of college programs utilize his system. So for me, that's like an instant that raises my eyebrows right away. I admittedly didn't know too much about him besides that he was at LSU for years. But if you have a guy who's so successful that other programs are picking up what this guy does, and outside of that alone, his tree of assistants have spread out throughout football as well. I am very, very excited to see what kind of a difference a guy like Tommy Moffitt can make in this program, just interacting with the guys and building his program, his strength and conditioning program here. So I think the O-line specifically benefits from that. You know, this has been an injury-riddled team for a couple of years. I don't know if this fixes that, but it certainly can't hurt. What do you guys think about Tommy Moffitt? I think that is at the top of my list. I'm really excited about the coordinators. We'll talk about them in a second, but I just think this is something that permeates every position group.
Well, I think, CD, I'll let you talk about this because you're a Big Ten West guy. So you can attest to the value of a strength and conditioning program, especially there in the Big Ten West.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You're looking at Michigan right now, and Ben Herbert, right? We see everyone's like, how often do you see a strength and conditioning coach like actually be brought up to the forefront of conversations? But I think that's being happened more often, and rightfully so. I think people are more getting an insight of what happens actually in the day-to-day operations, more so in the offseason, and who actually gets to interact with these players, like you mentioned, more so than ever. So yeah, this is massive. And you mentioned a change needed to happen, whether it was a mentality, a physicality, development with your bodies. You've seen guys like Bryce Foster, who's maybe regressed since he's been a freshman at the O-line. You mentioned that getting better, which definitely needs to be happening. So yeah, I love this here. I think it's credit to Mike Elko for being able to find a guy like him and convince him to come on staff, because why wouldn't you with the resources you guys know down there in College Station? It's just like everything else there. And yeah, I think this is, again, I love that you brought this up first because this is super important.
That's a good point. I mean, credit to Elko, because you know what Moffitt was doing? He was retired. I mean, it seemed like he was, right? He had years under his belt. He was at home. I mean, he was still working. He had his program and he was teaching that. But I mean, yeah, major credit to Elko for getting him.
Absolutely. And I like you ever see you see the picture of Tommy Moffitt where it was like, attention NFL scouts, these players, should not be drafted because they have, neglected their workout duties or the responsibility to their team working out. And like on that list was crazy because like La'el Collins, there's a couple other ones that are like names that you would know in the NFL. But I like that accountability, especially since like, it's starting to come out more and more that, the locker room culture these last couple of years may not there might have been less accountability, and when there was accountability, it was too late, right? So I think adding some extra accountability in that program, it can only do good. I mean, these are college kids. I mean, CD and I are college kids. I mean, there's a lot of responsibility to be learned, in those years of growth. So I like that a lot. Any other? I know you said you had a couple other highlights. Give me some other
Yeah.
highlights, Drew.
Yeah. Real quick, you made an interesting point there. Maybe some accountability issues, maybe some more mentality stuff. I think there was an interview or a press conference with Jimbo earlier this season, maybe coming right out of camp, where he kind of mentioned in passing that players needed to learn how to play through these nicks and knacks. I don't know if you remember this, but he definitely highlighted this in one of the early pressers. And to me, that's a lack of toughness. I mean, it's football. You're going to play through nicks and knacks. You're going to have to. And apparently players weren't practicing through some of that stuff in camp. So I think Moffitt really fixes that. And Chris, I think you mentioned the O-line and Bryce Foster maybe regressing a little bit. Well, we can go ahead and talk about Adam Cushing, because I do think Adam Cushing, who is the O-line coach now at A&M, Tommy Moffitt, and Colin Klein are all going to work hand in hand to make this O-line better. First of all, Colin Klein's scheme, but Adam Cushing is a major contrast, in my opinion, to what Steve Addazio was before. I think Addazio is more of like your hardcore, old school, I don't know how to describe it, but like kind of just like the old school vibe, a yeller, just very much an intensity kind of a guy.
It's very blue collar.
Very blue collar. That's the right way to say it. And I'm not saying Adam Cushing's not that, but when I hear Adam Cushing talk, and if you guys look on YouTube, there are some like coaching clinics that he's done that I've listened to that get me excited. He's very direct and down to earth and tactical with his approach. And that to me is hand in hand with what Elko is like. Elko's very organized. He's very, I guess, tactical. He's very Is intelligent the right word? I don't know, but it just seems more in line with what Elko wants to do. And I think you need to zig where the O line has been zagging because the O line has been bad for a couple of years. And like y'all said, like we've been saying, there's been regression amongst players like Foster and Fothery. I don't know about you guys. I thought Layden Robinson didn't take off the way he could have this year. I feel that's the way the whole O line has been over the last couple of years, just not progressing as we had hoped. And I really like the contrast going from Adazio to Cushing. And I mean, Cushing's been an O line coach for a long time. I mean, where's he been? He was at Duke before. I forget where he was before that. He was at Northwestern, right, for 15 years or something like that as the O line coach.
Yep.
He only gave up 15 sacks last year, and that was their down year of the two Elko years, I think. I'm really excited about Cushing in this O line, and also Colin Klein, just a new style, more innovative, more willing to get playmakers involved, and a little bit more creative with the O line, X's and O's and that kind of thing. If you go look at some of his film, it's some interesting stuff. I don't know if you guys have done a deep dive on Colin Klein yet. I've started to dabble. You're going to see some different looks by this O line this year, and I think that could help these guys out quite a bit. How do you feel about these two guys?
I love him. I love
Yeah,
it. I mean, it's gonna be like you said, like you see these clips, especially in the run game, and we've had, I think, really good running backs and veteran offensive line in some years that have kind of hidden some of the problems that run game had, like the lack of creativity. There is no lack of creativity with Colin Klein
innovator,
in
man.
his
Yeah,
innovator. Like he has guards moving all the place. You're going to see kind of a different kind of offensive lineman being recruited. I think you're going to start seeing, faster linemen being recruited, like guys that can get to the second level,
yeah,
which is fine. That might take a couple years to get those guys in. I think you saw, I mean, Dorian Hinton. We'll get into transfer portal guys later. I mean, he's a little bit smaller, but definitely a quick guy. Like I like what they're. I like what they got. I like what they got. I mean, CD, what are your thoughts on Colin Klein here? I know you love the hire almost more than I did.
Yeah, I thought it was super super impressive. What he did with some, I guess I wouldn't say limited talent at Kansas State because there were some nice players there, but I definitely think he maximized a lot of what he had there. He was a very, I would call it, just innovative quarterback in general when he played back at Kansas State there. Did a lot of fun things. Him and Coach Snyder there. But yeah, I think it's fantastic. Seen some of his clips, like you said on Twitter, the fun things he does, and just the total motion and different misdirection that you feel like you've been missing from a Jimbo Fisher offense. You got it a little bit this year. I was impressed with Bobby Petrino offensively. I wouldn't have hated if he stayed on, but obviously I understand that there was probably a change needed with Mike Elko bringing in his own guys he wanted in his own direction and culture. But in terms of pure scheme and culture, and I think Colin Klein can be a damn good recruiter too. I think his ability to connect with this generation, and whatnot, and obviously sell the Aggie program and everything that comes with it. Plus, getting some talent in that room right there. Obviously, Connor Wigman is a guy I know me and Matthew are super high, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, Andrew, on him if we get there. But yeah, I think he can do some special things, and I know Kansas State was pissed when they let him go or had to let him go.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that and I do feel under Jimbo that as great as of players that we did see at times. I mean, Anais Smith, A Chain, Isaiah Spiller, some of these guys were great, but I never felt like any offensive player reached their potential in college. Even A Chain, I feel like wasn't utilized to the fullest. They used him between the tackles a lot, but you look at how Miami uses him now, getting him in space, he's a lethal weapon. I just think that, and you think about more recently, Moose Muhammad, we didn't see him till the end of the year, and every time he touches the ball, something amazing happens. So I
Tell me
am
about
more
it.
confident. Yeah, I know you know, Matt. I know you know, but I'm just way more confident in guys that need the ball to get the ball as well under Klein because I think he's mentioned it. I mean, even Petrino mentioned it. We saw it to an extent, but I just made a complaint about last year where Moose Muhammad didn't get the ball. Feed the studs. That should absolutely be the mantra when you have the talent that A&M does offensively. With Jimbo, I felt like it was always trying to. He tried so hard to stick to his scheme. He tried so hard to remain unpredictable that at times I feel like players weren't showcased or utilized to the best of their ability. I'm really excited about that to change here.
I agree. I mean, you look at and I talked about the run game earlier. I mean, A&M was 90th in the country in rushing yards per game, 88th in rushing yards per attempt. And we only ran the ball 49% of the time, which was in the much lower half. And some of that had to do with, being down in games. But
Yeah,
Just
sure.
not a very effective run game this past year, and I am excited to see that change. Any other coaches that you really like that Mike Elko's brought on?
Yeah, I'll quickly go through a couple. I mean, Coach Ish, great recruiter, obviously a huge pedigree. Going back to like that 2022 class, he was instrumental in a lot of those early on. I mean, even right now, look at the DB haul we just got in the portal. I mean, Ish is involved with all that, and we just signed Petaway, I think his name is, in the 2025 class. That was an Ish as the primary recruiter. I mean, he hit the ground running here at A&M. He's back, and I mean, all reports about what he has been behind the scenes have always been glowing, even back to his time as an assistant and all that. And he's just a great addition to the secondary. And much like I said that Adam Cushing is zigging where the O-line was zagging before, you need a change in the secondary because I think corner straight up lost us 2 games this last year. You look at the Bama game, corners just getting destroyed consistently over and over again. Jalen Miller looking like a Heisman passer versus A&M. You look at Ole Miss, Trey Harris. I think he did his best impersonation of insert Hall of Fame NFL receiver. I mean, he was amazing versus us. So, you look at the portal, kind of previewing ahead to what we're going to talk about. You had to get some new corners in, and you had to get some new blood in that corner coaching staff. And I think Ish is a great addition there. It was going to be Wesley McGriff next to him. He went back to Auburn after taking the job here. Now it's Jordan Peterson, former Aggie. I mean, I think he's had 4 all Big 12 guys in his few years at
Kansas.
Kansas. Yeah, at Kansas, and he was the highest rated recruiter in the Big 12 that wasn't from Texas or OU last year. So I mean, you get another recruiter, another guy that can coach. I mean, you needed change, you got change, and this is some of the best you could have gotten, I think, if you're Mike Elko. So I'm feeling good about that, going hand in hand with all the defensive back additions that you got in the portal that we'll talk about in a minute. Obviously, Holman Wiggins is a huge name to get. I mean, did he coach Devontae Smith, right? Did he coach him?
Briefly overlap,
Briefly.
yeah.
Yeah, brief overlap. I think he gets a bad rep from Bama, but I just think that you needed a change in the wide receiver room as well. We weren't seeing great development there, and I'm excited to get a guy from the Saban coaching tree. That's always huge. We'll see how it works out. I was excited by the name. I just want to see some productivity there. I want to see some development over time, and he has some great tools to work with. So we'll have a good early glimpse of what Wiggins does. But I just think overall he got a bunch of really good recruiters on the staff. I think that's a common thread amongst all these guys. Trooper Taylor comes to mind as well. I mean, some dudes that have just gotten players at the highest level. Do y'all have any other highlights besides the guys that I brought up, or any thoughts on those guys?
Well, yeah, I do want to bring up Jordan Peterson real quick. I think that is such like an untalked about hire. It was talked about in A&M communities pretty well, but if you go, like one thing that a lot of people say, right, is like look at what your rivals or look at what the other team does. Like, what is their reaction when they lose a guy to you, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The reaction from Kansas fans when they lost Jordan Peterson was like a nuclear bomb went off, right? It was
Really?
almost as
That's
bad
awesome.
at, it was almost as bad as like, when their OC left to go to Penn State, right? Obviously, that's killer, but you still got Lance Leipold there, so you're like, all right, there's some continuity in that offense.
Right.
It's gonna be good. At least we have Jordan Peterson recruit that defensive side of the ball. Because you also look like Kansas and their defense, yeah, sure, like they didn't have a great pass rush, they didn't have a great run defense. But the common denominator is that they were like top 15 in interceptions the last 2 years with Lance Leipold. And creating those turnovers and having really good DBs changed games. It won them the Oklahoma game. It won them the Texas game, or uh, was that last or 2 years ago? They beat Texas 2 years. Oh, that might have 3 years ago. Either way,
Yeah.
that is how Kansas has won some games, some big time turnovers, big time plays by that secondary. So I love the Jordan Peterson hire. See, I want to hear you talk about Holman Wiggins because I know you're pretty familiar with him.
Yeah, so obviously, like you mentioned, everything that you said stands. You mentioned he did overlap with Devonta Smith, and obviously didn't help develop him, but that year he had him. He was obviously a Heisman Trophy winner.
Yep.
Obviously everything that happened in that offense was built through Smith and Waddle while they were healthy. A lot of other playmakers they had. He also helped develop and recruit Jameson Williams. Obviously in the transfer portal from Ohio State, but he really unlocked his full potential there. Yeah, you mentioned he does have a bad rep from Bama folks. I don't think it comes from his recruiting at all. Some of their development has not been great, but I don't think that blame it on him. They whiffed on some guys. They've also this year, I think you would have seen guys like Isaiah Bond guys like Malik Benson really take that step forward with an elite passing game. And this year, it wasn't really focused on that. It was kind of getting back to the old Saban roots about running the ball, playing good defense, and taking care of the football and taking deep shots when they had with Milroe's arm. I think this is a pretty splash hire. I don't think um yeah, I really like it. Recruiting wise, obviously he's getting in with the early Katie guy for 2025. I forget his name, but he's a guy that this old staff apparently neglected. And obviously Holman Wiggins' first thing he did when he got there was really contact him as an in-state 5-star receiver. So yeah, I think good things happen there. And again, it's another like impressive name for Mike Elko to leave a pretty quality place or wherever he was very happy and whether you had to pay him or whether you had to convince him, I think a little bit of both. But regardless,
Yeah.
though, you got to have respect for Elko and the staff he's building.
Yeah. And one more thing on Wiggins. I mentioned this to my audience when it first happened. Just the perception factor alone of getting a guy like that is huge. But he's also, there's like the cherry on top. He was the primary offensive recruiter for Terry Bussey when he was at Bama. So he had that contact already. And that's obviously a battle that's still going on. So that's just a little bonus right there. So yeah, a lot of benefits to him. I think he still needs to be proven. I think that's safe to say, but I think it looks good. It feels like a good pickup right now.
Yeah. Holman Wiggins, Nick Scorden, who's Terry Bussey's cousin. There's a
That's right.
large effort in College Station to, I think, get Terry Bussey. So the
Yes.
last thing I want to bring up, Drew, while we have you here talking about coaches. So Sean Spencer is a new defensive line coach at Texas A&M, right? You lose Elijah Robinson, who a lot of people would say was kind of the lifeblood of A&M recruiting in the last, I mean, however many years he was there.
Mm-hmm.
Describe to me or quantify as best you can what that loss is and like how we have maybe compensated for that.
Well, I think the loss in the transfer portal kind of speaks for itself. You lose a bunch of D linemen. You didn't think, well, I didn't think we would lose Fadil Diggs. I think if we lost him, it would
Yep.
have been going pro. I think that was a major surprise. LT Overton, I mean, I don't know if he was the most productive here. He was a consistent contributor, but losing him probably wouldn't have happened if you didn't lose Erob. It was a little bit surprising. Walter Nolan, kind of knowing him and knowing his mentality, it doesn't surprise me as much to lose him, but losing Erob basically guaranteed it. So you see that right away. I mean, you see that's Erob right there, most likely affecting those decisions. It's hard for me to say that he's irreplaceable because anybody can be replaced in this world. Yes, he had relationships that were formed. That's just part of losing a coach. Or firing a coach. That's just part of coaching turnover. That's part of the game. So I think Sean Spencer is as good of a veteran or a name that's known, a guy that's probably had communication with a lot of players that we would be recruiting anyway. He's in this footprint. He has pedigree. He's been around a long time. I really like getting Sean Spencer in here. He's already getting involved with recruiting. He's active on Twitter. You love to see him tweeting out every time we get a commit. Feels good. I think he's a very worthy replacement for Erob, but Erob did hold a special place in all of our hearts. He held it down. He held it down after Terry Price passed away. Just he'll always be an Aggie in my eyes, even though the end there was some, I guess, drama. I don't know, with him getting some guys to go to Syracuse. Whatever. Erob's a legend. We're moving on. I feel like they did fine replacing with Sean Spencer and others. This whole staff is full of great recruiters, great relationship guys. So, and then Tony Girardetti is another great recruiter who had great relationships with those guys too. So you don't lose everything with Erob, but you lose some.
I would like to ask
Definitely.
a question too about just the staff in general. Like you keep bringing up recruiting, which I do love, and we do know that is the lifeline of college football. Even with transfer portal, I think high school recruiting still has to be the focus if you're a program that can recruit at the capability that A&M has. But in terms of recruiting that leads to production, obviously the last staff and Jimmy Fisher, they put an emphasis on recruiting and they finished with some top, real nice classes. Obviously the one in 2022 that highlighted it, the cherry on top.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you see that production in terms of moving those top 5, top 7 classes into more wins, or I
Sure.
guess and whatnot, and so how is that going to change here to convince like a someone on that?
Sure. It might be hard to convince you, but I'll do my best. So I think in today's day and age in college football, it is very rare to have a program that is consistent and can keep guys long term. Because as soon as these 5-star guys can see opportunity elsewhere and NIL deals elsewhere now, they can leave. I think there are 2 or 3 programs that are able to hold on to these guys and build like a winning culture and a culture of togetherness as a program. And that's like Georgia, Alabama, maybe Ohio State. They kind of recruit at that level, but they haven't won anything in recent years. It's really, really hard to do that. And if you look at the championship this year, Michigan and Washington, these are teams that had full buy-in. They had continuity on their rosters year on year. So yes, recruiting has to be good. I would like to recruit at a top 10 level consistently and not have to get 35 kids in the portal. I think that's where you want to be. But I think you have to use the portal as well. You need to be willing to use it. I don't think Jimbo was very willing to use it. And I think that made A&M pay in the cornerback department. That's just something I've been saying on my channel. We wish we would have gotten some more corners in the portal last year. So you fill in the gaps of the portal. You don't have to recruit at that top 3 level that Jimbo was recruiting at. I think Michigan and Washington have proved that. I think you just need to build a team that is bought in, that wants to play together, that wants to play for their staff, that has the right mindset, and they can stay together for several years and build together. And I like some of the players they targeted in the portal. A lot of these guys are upperclassmen with 2 years of eligibility left. That's like a common thread. They're all like 3 or 4 years of experience with 1 or 2 years of eligibility left. And the ones with 2 years of eligibility left with all that experience, that's great because those guys can get into your culture and learn your way, and you'll have a couple years with them rather than going and targeting guys that have a year left or that might bounce again. I really like that. It's about togetherness. It's about buy-in. It's about building year on year. And I would like to see that a little bit different than how it was before. Like you said, I think, Matt, you mentioned it earlier, there's just more and more coming out about how behind the scenes, maybe this team wasn't as together or as locked in as we would have hoped or thought. So I think that'll be a priority going forward while also recruiting really well. But I'm okay if you're not top 3 like Jimbo was a couple times. Does that cover it? I don't know. I've been thinking about this a
No,
lot.
I think that's great. I think you hit it on the nose. I agree with you. Yeah, we could talk some stuff. We could talk after we
Yeah,
record,
yeah.
but it's I'm excited. I'm super excited.
Yeah, yeah. I
Let's
know. Yeah.
let's move on though. Let's talk about transfer portal because obviously this is, I mean, what half of this entire transport class is more than Jimbo brought in his entire tenure at Texas A&M.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is a gigantic class full of talent from all over the country, from California to the East Coast. It's from everywhere, right? There's a couple players to highlight this, of course. I do want to ask you. I know you have some players that you want to talk about for sure, but I do
Mm-hmm.
want to ask you in terms of Desrix and Nick Gordon. Were you surprised that A&M, that Mike Elko and his staff was able to turn around so quickly and snag elite, high-level transfer portal talent like these guys?
Was I surprised? Yeah, I think I was surprised. I think he exceeded my expectations. I think the class as a whole exceeded my expectations. And yeah, I think so. I didn't expect for him to hit the ground running the way he did. I wouldn't have been surprised if a couple years down, a guy like Elko got to a point where he could get classes, could get guys like this. But for him to bust onto the scene and all of a sudden, I don't know if I guess I wasn't following it closely enough. The first I saw of Nick Scorton, where there was heavy smoke of him coming here, was a Steve Wiltfong crystal ball. And that's nails. You know that like it's happening if you get fonged. And just when I saw that, yes, I was surprised. But talk about a guy who's probably a day one starter. That's hard to come by in the portal. I mean, not every program gets that kind of guy. And there's some talent on this D line still that he will be playing over, I believe. That's just a huge guy to get. The leading sack man of the Big Ten. Is that right? Was he the leading sack getter in the Big Ten? I mean, that can't be overstated. That's huge. And then Des Ricks, you're still looking at potential there, but a super high profile guy, 5-star out of high school, obviously. I think he was an early enrollee, or he declared a year early, so he's younger.
Yeah, yeah, he was the number one corner in the 2024 class. So he would be the number one cornerback in this incoming class, but
Yeah,
instead he reclassified, was still a top 5 corner, and then just got a year in Nick Saban's weight room over there at Alabama. So
absolutely. You get the red shirt with Nick Saban, and then he comes to your program. You have 4 fresh years with him. So yeah, we'll talk more about the DB Hall in a second, but that guy obviously in a major position of need. And then Nick Gordon just getting a monster on the defensive line.
yeah, absolutely. And CD, I'm
Crazy,
sure you
awesome.
I'm sure you can testify, CD, that Nick Gordon is the real deal.
He was. Oh yeah, yeah. He was a monster. He decimated Minnesota and everybody else in the Big Ten. Like the fact that yes, you mentioned he led the Big Ten in sacks, which is super impressive. But you have to think he was playing in the Big Ten West, where teams don't throw the ball a ton, and so to have the limited reps and exposure to that, and to be the focus on that D line and that Purdue defense that was not very productive outside of him, and he still competed. Obviously, he's a College Station guy, right, or Bryan
Yep.
County
Yep.
guy. So that's exciting. Homecoming for him and his family. I'm sure he's excited to wear the maroon. But yeah, he was a monster. And I think the best part about it, I thought, was it almost just like stopped bleeding. And all the national attention was like, oh, here's Walter Nolan, here's LT Overton, here's Evan Stewart, all these guys that are out, these 5 stars that are out of the door. Obviously, really good players in their own right, but to land a very high profile guy like Nick Gordon against some teams that really, really wanted him. And I remember when that happened, Mike Elko, he was supposed to take a couple visits, and like the rumor was like the first visit he gets was the one he was going to commit to, and Mike Elko and staff got him on to visit them first, and obviously the visit lasted longer than it was supposed to, and that was obviously a good sign. That's when the Wiltfong crystal ball came in, and then obviously the announcement came, and I know A&M's fans everywhere, were very excited, and I'm sure Mike Elko and Sean Spencer were too.
Huge.
Absolutely. Drew, let me ask you this. What are who are some guys that we should be looking out for in this class? It's a gigantic class. I'm not going to ask you to go through every single player, but give us some players that we should like.
All right. So going hand in hand with Nick Scorton, who is obviously a monster. And one more thing about him, he has a strong side defensive end build. He's 6'4", 280, but he's still putting up defensive end edge numbers and can play that role. It's kind of crazy. I mean, I think back to like Mike Clemens kind of vibes. I don't know. I can't wait to watch him play. I'm excited. But hand in hand with him, Cassius Howell out of Bowling Green, another 10+ sack guy. I mean, kind of a position of need. You have a couple of defensive ends at Texas A&M. You have a couple of edge guys you're excited about. You think about Eni White. You think about Malik Silla. These are all guys that have needed some time in the weight room to get big and to really come into their own. They've gotten more playing time over the years, but a guy like Cassius Howell fits into this rotation perfectly. I'm really excited to see what, excuse me, I'm really excited to see what Mike Elko does on third downs, because I think back to like 2020 or 2019 or whatever when he was here, the third down packages he would throw out with like Clemens and Tyree Johnson on the outside and moving the Marvin Leal inside. He had like Bobby Brown who could rush from the inside. PV was a big guy who could also rush from the inside. With all these different builds he has on the defensive line and like a guy like Nick Scorton and Shamar Turner that are just like these hybrid freaks, I am so excited to see what he can put together in these package situations, like these third and longs. And then a guy like Samu Tamuamu Pepe, the giant guy, I want to see them utilize him in these goal line situations. I'm excited to see him play around with these characters, man. It's exciting. So Cassius Howell, another great edge rusher, super excited about him. Let me pull up my notes. I have a couple of guys that I've been pretty high on.
Okay, well, let me ask you real quick while you're pulling that up.
Yeah.
So, with the addition of these two edges, do you think it's confirmed that kind of they're planning on moving Shamar Turner to more of a 3 technique permanently?
I think so, and he's gotten bigger and bigger every year. So
Yeah.
yes,
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
yes.
I think he's inside. I do, and I think you can move him outside if you need to, if you want to show a different look, and I think they will just to throw the offensive lines off. But yeah, I think he's starting at the 3 tech this year. I do. I've already been visualizing on my show. I'm thinking like Shamar Stewart and Nick Scorton outside. You just start the 2 hybrid guys. You don't start with a true edge rusher on first down. You can if you want, but these guys can take care of both sides of things on first down, I think. And then you have Shamar Turner inside. And then you can take your pick. It's like Gabriel Brownlow, Dindy, DJ Hicks, Albert Regis even could start there. You have some guys to play with right there. So yeah, man, can you believe that we got Scorton, got some other guys in the portal, and then Shamar Turner announces he's returning? Like on top of that,
Dude, that was
that,
the cherry on top.
yes, it was crazy to see. It was awesome. And then that actually leads me to another guy I had on my list, kind of an under the radar guy in the portal that I actually think was kind of an important pickup. Wisconsin, D lineman Rodis Johnson. He's played a lot. He's not really a high profile guy. Maybe CD you can speak to this more, but I think he's the kind of guy that when you lose a guy like Albert Regis, you lose a Walter Nolan, you lose some depth inside on your D line. he can fill out a rotation. He can play. You can put him in there if you need to spell guys or you want to give a different look. So I'm excited to get a guy with experience in there to immediately be able to fill out your rotation. What do you think about that, CD? Do you have any inside info on Rodis Johnson?
Yeah, I mean, he's a fine player. He's not a guy, obviously not the headliner that Cassius
Right.
Howell and Nick Scorton are. But again, like another body to be in there. And again, you mentioned like the versatility that Mike Elko loves to play with and like the different bodies he's bringing in. Cassius Howell, a little smaller, a little slenderer. Obviously, Nick Scorton, a bigger bodied edge. And obviously, the guys, the Gabriel Brownlow, Dinley, everyone else there, and the things he can do with them. Yeah, I think that's what you need. And it gives Mike Elko the tools to really get after it. I don't know. I mean, DJ Durkin kind of had that for a couple years. I don't know if he really took advantage to it, and now he takes his talents to Auburn. So good luck to
Yeah,
your
his
SEC
talents,
West
right? His
rivals.
his talents, his talents. I
Yeah.
don't know if you've watched this long enough, Drew, but there are opinions about DJ Durkin on this show. There are opinions.
Oh, I can imagine. I can imagine. I don't think I've caught any of those, but now that you're hinting at it, I think I know where you would take that. Yeah, yeah. So good luck to Auburn.
Yeah, good luck to Auburn. Good luck to Auburn. So, Drew, any other players that you want us to keep
Yeah,
our eye out for?
I'll do one more defensive guy. And honestly, this is take your pick at defensive back. I went with BJ Mays. I mean, I'm from San Antonio. He was at UIW for a couple of years. Seems like he's just kind of moved like this throughout his college career. Now he was 1 year at UAB. Great job. 41 tackles, 10 deflections, 2 interceptions, productive guy. But really, I'm excited about getting all of these defensive back bodies into the room because not only did you lose some corners, you were just bad there last year. So I'm calling it like the battle royale for the cornerback position because you have like 10 guys now that are going to go fight for that. And of course, you think like a Des Ricks might have like the edge in that. Do you know anything about Tyreek Chappelle? He hasn't committed anywhere yet, has he?
He hasn't that he's coming back, I believe.
I think so
He's
too. I think his dad posted a picture of him in an A&M jersey a couple of weeks ago. I'm leaning towards it, but I don't want to, count my chickens before they hatch. You got a lot of defensive backs. You got a lot of big defensive backs. Apparently, Elko loves himself a giant corner because he got like 4 of them in the portal that are like 6'3". Great stuff. But BJ Mays, I'm high on him. Des Ricks has a chance. There's a bunch of guys that have a chance there. But moving to the offensive side of the ball, I think A&M is actually pretty set for their starting group offensively next year outside of the portal. I think they're secure in the running back rotation. I think they have as good a chance as ever to have a good O-line based on just having so many upperclassmen and experienced guys in there. I mean, if you're not an upperclassman, like you think about a Basantis who has a year of starting under his belt, you're going to have a chance to find someone, I think, from within. You also pulled some guys from the portal, I think 3 portal offensive lineman, if I'm not mistaken. But you did need some people to round out your receiver room, and many people will say that you maybe need another one or so. But Jabari Barber and Cyrus Allen are 2 dudes from Group of 5 programs that were very productive. I think both would maybe tend to be a slot kind of a body coming to this level of play. They're a little bit smaller. I think Jabari's 5'10", under 200 pounds for sure. I don't know his exact weight, but I know Cyrus Allen is 6'1", 177, a little bit more of a slender build. These are a couple of explosive guys that I don't think start or anything like that day one. We're really excited about Noah. We're excited about Moose. We're excited about all these guys. Obviously, Jade Walker just announced that he will be returning next year through Aggies United. That thing they're doing every day where they're announcing players returning, which is awesome. I love to see it. Whatever. I don't know if it's necessary, but cool. But you
it's
needed some
fun.
guys to fill out this rotation. It's fun. It's fun. Yeah. And these are both like, I think Jabari was close to 1,000 yards receiving last year. Cyrus Allen was 750 or so yards receiving last year. These are guys that can play. These are guys with experience. These are upperclassmen. These guys can round out your rotation where you don't have to rely on them down on down, but they can go out there and make things happen when you need them. So I'm really excited about those 2 receivers. I think you need one more. You might need another running back because I don't know what's going on with Le'Veon Moss. I don't know if y'all have heard the smoke about Le'Veon. Maybe, there was a weird Instagram story last week. He didn't show up to the bowl game. I think that was personal. I don't know what's going on there. You only have 4 scholarship running backs, even if he does come back. So you probably need one more running back. But I really like what they did at the tail end of that receiver room in the portal. There's a couple other guys I got too, but these are the 2 I highlighted.
Yeah, I like those a lot. I like those a lot. Let me lean back to the defensive side of the football because that's what we I don't know. I'll give you an option. How about this? Would you rather talk about Ricky Wright or would you rather talk about Alex Howard right now?
Oh,
Do you have some
oh,
notes on either
hit
of
me with
those?
hit me with Alex Howard. I want to hear you talk about Alex Howard because I didn't do extended research on him, and I'd like to learn right now.
All right, so Alex Howard is from Youngstown State. Okay. He's pretty tall. He's not necessarily your thick guy, tons of speed, right? And there is footage of him playing Division I football because they played against Ohio State, and that was easily his best game by far. He had like some like 8 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, a sack. His closing speed is pretty ridiculous. And you lose Edge Cooper, who I mean, Daniel Jeremiah has Edge Cooper as the 20th ranked prospect in the NFL draft.
Oh
So
yeah,
you can kind of understand what that means for A&M's defense to lose a guy like that, a guy that just ate up blocks, was really good in coverage, knew where to find the football. He was really good. Okay, so
yep.
they found Alex Howard. Maybe he can replace. I don't know. You got some other guys there coming up. Does Damian Sanford get some time at linebacker? I don't know. So Alex Howard, I like him a lot, but we'll see. It's throwing darts sometimes when you're recruiting guys up from the lower divisions of football, not just conferences, the lower divisions. So we'll
Alex
see how
Howard
that
has a ton of
works.
experience, man. I mean, yeah, he could come in and make some noise right away. That linebacker, the linebacker starter next to Torian York, that's going to be another hell of a battle. I don't know who's going to emerge in it, but that's a situation where you have so many, at least decent options where I'm going to feel pretty good about whoever emerges from that battle. And yeah, it could be Alex Howard. I mean, that's a great option there.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you have other players you wanted to talk about?
Well, who else were you mentioning? You were leaning to someone else, and I want to
I
hear you
was
talk about
leaning
him.
to Ricky Wright.
Oh, let's hear about DeRicky. Yeah. Okay.
So Ricky Wright, I mean, 6'4", what is he, like 230 pounds, 225? Large human being. The question is like, what position does he play? Because he can actually play like any position. He
Yeah,
can he can play safety, he can play slot corner or nickel or whatever. He can play linebacker too. Like
he's
let's
huge.
not let's
He's like
not
6'4".
sleep. Yeah, let's not sleep on the fact that the Ricky Wright could legitimately play you know, some uh, some linebacker on certain packages for Texas A&M. So that I like the versatility there because obviously Mike Elko loves versatility. He also loves big DBs. I mean, if
Yeah,
people didn't notice with Antonio Johnson and Jalen Jones, like he likes long big DBs, and this is exactly what he gets. And I think he made a pretty good pitch. I don't think Ricky Wright was even I don't think he loved Texas A&M. And then he visited. I think Mike Elko gave him the pitch like, "Hey," and look, if Mike Elko convinced Ricky Wright that they're going to use him properly, then I believe that they might just have a chance to use him properly.
absolutely, man. Yeah, that's a versatile guy. That's a huge guy. And that's one of the guys, him and Alex Howard, I think were in the earlier round of the transfer portal commits before the huge recruit weekend or the huge portal weekend. So like I was high on these guys, and then we had all these other guys come in. I'm high on them. So I even forget about these guys. There've just been so many guys entering the program, and it's awesome. I just think that you needed to fill in gaps I mean, obviously based on guys that you lost, but getting guys in position of need, having these battles play out through spring and fall camp. I mean, the best are going to rise to the top, man. There's just a lot of options out there. I don't know who it is yet. We could have mentioned the name of like the next all SEC player next year. We don't even know, but there's going to be amazing battles between these really, really promising athletes.
Absolutely. All right, I want you to summarize for me your, let's say, optimism for this class of transporter recruits.
My optimism. So, like I keep getting at, I really like that they targeted a lot of experienced guys, even though a lot of them are G5. They're all, I mean, what's the complaint? They all have size, they have experience, they've been good at the college level. I mean, well, what is keeping these guys from being good at the next level? They've been cooking, they're ready to move on to this level where there was opportunity. So, my level of confidence, my level of optimism right now going into next year, I'll say this. I'm way more optimistic than I was the week after the Mississippi State game. I didn't know what the heck was going on. I didn't know who we were going to go for. I didn't know if A&M had a plan. I didn't know what we were going to do. And over the course of the year, as the Jimbo discourse kind of heat up and talks about him maybe having to get fired at the end of the year or whatever, I was always high on Elko. But as other names started emerging, like a Kalen DeBoer, I mean, the however real it was, like the Lane Kiffin talks or whatever, I was getting shiny object syndrome. Like, should we go for this guy? Should we go for that guy? And then all of a sudden, Mark Stoops. But then that debacle happens, and we somehow stumble or land on Elko. And I think it's worked out as best as we could have ever hoped. I can't think of an Aggie whose expectations have not been exceeded by his first 2 months as the head coach of A&M. So, I mean, I would say my optimism level on this class is at least worth one more win on a potential win-loss record I would project going into next year. Is that a good way to contextualize it?
Yeah,
I would say it's
honestly.
worth a win. I would say it's worth a win, basically, is what I would ultimately, describe it as.
Yeah, and we know how important wins are in college football. They mean more in
Yes,
college football than they do in just about any other sport. CD, do
absolutely.
you want to quantify your optimism for this program as an outsider?
Yeah, so I think obviously everything sounds fantastic, and I am pretty high on A&M. I was this going into the year. I was still kind of waiting to see a process, but obviously the talent, right, the blue chip ratio everyone talks about is there with A&M, even after a lot of the portal exodus that happened after Jimbo Fisher leaving. Obviously, they're bringing a bunch of guys. You mentioned a lot of the G5 guys. I love those kind of players. You're seeing it more and more in the NFL. Is like the NFL doesn't care about G5 players, and they're coming in and having instant impacts right away and becoming all pro guys. Uh, the recruiting services are doing it now with even lower competition players from small towns or like lower classifications in their respective states. And yeah, college football is right on that track of doing that as well. As like, yeah, we got a guy from the CUSA and the Sun Belt for receiver, but those guys are really impactful players for their respective teams, and I think they can come in and do good things. I will say though, I do want to ask your opinion, Drew, on whether like cause here's how I'm kind of seeing it, and I guess I want to see it with more like cautious lens, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So we obviously a lot has been made. Like A&M's right now second in the transfer portal rankings, just behind Ole Miss, who's had a very, very elite class themselves. Ohio State's up there, Oregon's up there, Florida State, like the usual suspects.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, how often does that translate to wins? Like, is this a formula for sustained success? Is this a formula for like immediate turnaround for the program? I don't know. To me, I feel like you have to have a base ground of elite talent through the high school recruiting, and then you can supplement it with certain needs. And it seems like this is that kind of roster where like a team like Florida State has some pretty good talent, and then they can build to the transfer portal as well when in a coaching change like Mike Norvell did. But obviously a program like Colorado, right, who's just trying to fix it all in one year, and obviously you saw the bottom kind of fall out. Those were a little bit high expectations for after that great September they had, but regardless, I think the point still stands. I want to ask you how you're feeling about that in terms of like, is this like should we be like cautiously optimistic, or is this
Yeah.
like this is the future of college football?
No, cautiously optimistic is the correct way to feel towards this. So I think the number one ideal way to use the portal is just to kind of grab and go. Your program is already cruising and you're like a Texas, to put it. I mean, I'll talk about my rival. Fine. It's fine. They did it. They did it well. They lost a bunch of receivers. They lost their tight end. They go out and they get some of the best possible available to fill in that specific need, but they don't get over 10 guys in the portal. They just get exactly what they need at the highest possible level. Ohio State, I don't even know if they really needed the guys that they got, but getting Judkins and getting Caleb Downs, you're getting the best of the best because your program is already fine. You already have your base. You already have the bulk of your roster built out with the guys you want it to be. And I think that's where you want to be in this sport right now. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, getting 15, 20 guys in the portal, that's going to be normal going forward. Maybe. It's hard to forecast it. It's hard to predict it. I will say this, A&M had to get a lot of guys this year. When you have coaching turnover in this day and age, you're going to have to fill in your roster somehow. Players are going to leave when you lose a coach because you lose the assistants. You lose the guys that recruited them. You lose the guys that thought they were going to play for. So you have to fill out the roster somehow. A&M could have just filled it with bread or guys that weren't good. They got some quality dudes. So we feel really good about the class they put together. I don't think it's the ideal use for the portal, even though you had to do it. You have to play ball with the game at hand. And A&M did that. But in year 3 of Elko, I'd rather be doing what Texas, what Ohio State, what even Ole Miss is doing. And that's just stacking talent that you didn't really need, but they help you push forward and hit the fast forward button just year to year. So I hope to be at that point where you're getting 10, 15 man portal classes. You're leaning on your development. You're leaning on guys being in your system for years. Like we mentioned at the beginning of the video, continuity, buy-in, longevity, building your program like that is the ideal way to move forward in football, in college football right now, I think. But obviously, small sample size. This is the ultimate small sample size sport. We'll learn more as time goes on. Maybe this is a winner next year. I don't know. But I mean, I'm not projecting a championship run. I'm not projecting a playoff run yet. I'm projecting a positive year one of Mike Elko right now, at the very least.
That's music to my ears.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure
Well,
it is. I'm sure it is.
thank you, Drew, so much for joining us on the Redshirt Sophomore. We loved it. Make sure you guys check out his YouTube link in the description. You guys can follow him on Twitter too at Drewtamu. He was incredible. Make sure you guys shout him out, like his videos, subscribe, do what you guys got to do. Make sure you also, if you like the content here, like the video. That's our rule. It's our rule. We'll say it every single time. Make sure you guys subscribe as well. If you're listening on Spotify, we thank you. Make sure you follow us. If you really like it, give us a 5-star rating. We would appreciate that as well. And make sure you guys keep on tuning in. Drew, you got anything else that you want
Yeah, one last
to
thing,
say?
guys. Thanks so much for having me. I mean, any opportunity to get on with another guy, another up and coming channel like yours is awesome. I'm thrilled to get on with you guys and talk to you guys. You guys know a lot. You guys deserve to have a lot more subscribers than where you're at now, and you will if you just keep pushing forward. So all of my viewers that are here, make sure y'all subscribe to these guys right here. These guys know what they're talking about. These guys are passionate. Get with the program, guys. Let's go. Subscribe to these guys. You won't regret it.
Thank you, Drew. CD, anything on the way out?
No, can't thank you enough, Drew. This was awesome. We learned a lot in just a short hour talking to you, and we really appreciate you coming down, shouting us out, helping our channel grow, and obviously letting us learn as college football lovers and viewers.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Alrighty. And we will see you guys in the next one.